This is a download from BFM 89.9, the business station.
7:08. You're listening to the evening edition with Lynn and Cam. And just in brief, some updates on the unfolding political drama in our country, as we covered yesterday. After the Prime Minister failed to push a proposed state of emergency through, Umno and PAS then held meetings to decide what their next steps would be and where their support would lie. And today we heard that, they have come back both essentially supporting the current administration.
And with the razor-thin margins in the Parliament, PAS with its 18 MPs, we must remember that number, 18, are essentially kingmakers. And in a statement today, the Secretary-General stressed that all 18 PAS MPs support PN to ensure the safety, economic life and national order are guaranteed.
Yeah, it was quite, or at least it seemed like a pretty wholehearted measure of support, which is in comparison, I think, with what we are seeing from BN/UMNO. So BN met first, subsequently the UMNO Supreme Council met. And I think with there, it at least feels, based off of what has been said, a little bit more conditional, right? There are questions about, some BN lawmakers wanted to see a snap election. We also saw former Prime Minister Najib Abdul Razak raising the possibility of cooperating with Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim. So I think there's a little bit more of a mix of opinions happening on that front.
PAS, I think, has always had quite good discipline in its ranks, in its messaging as well. UMNO, on the other hand, have in the past had good messaging discipline, but there are fractures now and different camps which can be exploited. So, and PAS is there to take part in that exploitation as well.
And I think considering the fact that UMNO has said in what feels like no uncertain terms that they will not be working with PKR and DAP, that leaves, in terms of what I would imagine are the negotiations happening at this point in time about how to shore up support, who's going to be moving where, I would think that leaves precious little room for maneuvering, because there are only so many parties in the country. There are only so many MPs that you can be speaking to at this moment in time. And if you are cutting off, one whole chunk from those discussions, then, that is what it is. There is also, I think, the opening to talk about a unity government, which was a term that was introduced to our lexicon earlier this year and then sort of went nowhere. Unity government,
unity in whose eyes? One man's unity is another man's, no thank you. So I think in normal times, COVID-19, in normal times, a lot of people would be saying general election now. But it's the last thing that anybody wants on the ground. But it just to break the deadlock.
So, like we said, we are diving back into the murky waters of Malaysian politics and looking at what it means that both UMNO and PAS have come out to continue pledging their support to the Perikatan Nasional Administration. Tell us what you think. Ask us any questions you might have. That number to call is 77332900. You can WhatsApp 018-789-8899 and tweet us at BFM Radio. After this, we will be speaking with Professor James Chin, who is the Professor of Asian Studies at the University of Tasmania. So keep it here on the evening edition, BFM 89.9.
Boleh for Malaysia. BFM 89.9, the business station.
It's 7:13 and you're listening to the evening edition with Lynn and Cam. We're talking now about the ongoing movements that we're seeing happen in our political sphere. And this is, of course, coming after UMNO and PAS emerged from meetings, continuing to support the, I think it's fair to say at this point, embattled Perikatan Nasional Administration. And so we'd like to know your thoughts. Send them through. You can call us 77332900, WhatsApp 018-789-8899, and tweet us at BFM Radio. Now, joining us over Zoom is Professor James Chin, who is the Professor of Asian Studies at the University of Tasmania. Prof, thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening.
So, after the meetings and updates of the last few days, how would you describe the Prime Minister's political standing at this moment in time?
Right. I think the way to understand what has happened over the last few days is that we really have to go back all the way back to February when the first chaotic thing happened, which is the creation of new Perikatan government. And because I think it was a hurried process, a lot of the deals done back then, they didn't really think through. Like a lot of promises were made, and a lot of promises could not be kept. So that sort of built up the tensions with what is happening right now with the trigger being Anwar's attempt to take over the government. But over the last week, I think what we saw is basically that UMNO could not come to consensus within the party itself about which direction to take. So that's the reason why they had a very chaotic meeting last night. I spoke to quite a number of people who were in the meeting, outside the meeting, and the general consensus was that they could not come to some sort of agreement. So that's the reason why when they left the room, each of the reporters wrote different stories. It depends on who you're speaking to. But I think in terms of the question you asked, where does the Prime Minister Muhyiddin, where does he sit in all of this? I would argue that at the present moment, he's in quite a sweet spot. I think it's very difficult to remove him at the present moment. And as long as things stay roughly the same, he's only got to worry about the budget process that's coming up. Other than that, I think he's in quite a good position right now.
So you've mentioned the different voices coming out of UMNO. And what about PAS? PAS's decision to back Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin and his administration?
Right. In terms of PAS, PAS is interesting in the sense that they've always been a minor playing out of all this. I think the way to understand PAS is that this is the first time in a very, very long time that they're part of the federal government. So their thing is that they want to stay part of the federal government in order to implement their policies. As you know, PAS has been making promises to the rural Malay community for many, many years. And one of the things they're really keen on doing is to push for a more Islamic style of government, and especially RE 355. So I think they want to be in government to show that at least they're doing all this. A large section of PAS actually also believe in the ideology of Ketuhanan Melayu, so this fits in very well with their idea of promoting Ketuhanan Islam. So I think at the basic level, PAS under Hadi Awan is all about staying in government. It doesn't matter which government, as long as they control some of the key positions relating to Islam.
Now, with that said, what about UMNO, especially because we have seen some fault lines emerging post the Sabah election? What does this move say about UMNO's position within the government and potentially its possible future come GE15?
Right. UMNO is basically split right now. A lot of people argue that UMNO is actually split two ways. I would argue that UMNO is actually split in more than two ways. So the way to understand UMNO is that basically one group got involved with Muhyiddin and formed Perikatan government based on a certain set of promises, including that some people will be well looked after. And when that didn't happen, they threw a fit and said that we're going to create alternative coalition, which is Muafakat, which is sort of a warning shot to Muhyiddin. And when Muafakat did not really take off the ground, they decided that maybe we should send another warning shot to Muhyiddin by talking to Anwar and talking to other people. So that's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is that UMNO itself has been sort of lost since 2018. They're still trying to find a way around. My impression is that there's still a lot of people at UMNO, CNA people at UMNO, who truly believes that UMNO can make a strong comeback. And they always remind me of the experiences of LDP in Japan. As many of your listeners know, LDP was actually very similar to UMNO, was in power for a very long time. And when they were out of power, they took real reforms and that allowed them to come back. And now they're back in power. So a lot of people argue that the problem with UMNO now is that there was no leader who's willing to undertake deep reforms in UMNO. So it's not that UMNO is not powerful, it's just that they need a strong leader to take UMNO through the reform process. Now, what is really interesting in UMNO since 2018 is that people said that, Zahid is in charge, so-and-so is in charge, when in fact the thought leader since 2018 is still Najib. If you speak to the people who were at last night's meeting, right, the person who had the most interesting idea, who spoke the longest, was actually Najib. So Najib, despite all the things that's happened to him, is still the thought leader of UMNO. And for whatever it's worth, my thinking is that a lot of senior people UMNO actually don't think Zahid has the making of a long-term leader. Because to be a leader UMNO and to be a leader of a country, you really need somebody who has a sort of strategic thinking. And unfortunately, UMNO, in terms of talent, right, at the very top now, I think Najib is still number one.
So you're talking about some of the behind-the-scenes actions. Can we read anything, though, into the public statements where PAS has been very full in its support for PN, whereas UMNO's is more tentative or conditional? Does this mean are we reading too much into too little information?
My friend, I think you've been around Malaysian politics to know that all these press statements are not worth the paper it's printed on. I think the way to understand this is that in UMNO, the problem now is that because it's so broken up into so many different factions, a lot of the statements are issued by the factions themselves. They don't really represent the thinking of the entire UMNO, because right now, there is no such thing as consensus in UMNO.
Coming back then to a name that you brought up, which is, of course, the former Prime Minister, Datuk Sri Najib Razak. So one of the suggestions, I mean, he has said a few things today, or rather has been reported as saying a few things today, one of which was UMNO, should work with Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim if a general election is not called after the pandemic improves in the country. How likely is this to happen?
Right, just a slight correction. A lot of the reporting, what Najib says, is actually very accurate because he actually posted his thing on Facebook. So it's very much straight from the horse's mouth. Now, in terms of Najib, I think he's right. The longer this thing is not resolved, the party that will be hurt the most in the next GE will be UMNO itself. So the big battle is whether Bersatu can swallow up UMNO or UMNO will swallow up Bersatu. So there's not enough space in the current coalition to have the Malay party with the same DNA. People keep forgetting that there's really no difference between UMNO and Bersatu, because Bersatu was basically a breakaway faction of UMNO. People who liked Mahathir and who didn't like Najib. So in terms of the political ideology, everything is very similar to UMNO. So it's all about personality. So at the end of the day, if they really want to do well in the next general election, it will probably be one Malay party plus PAS.
So UMNO, at least recently, has officially given the position that they will not consider cooperating with PKR and or DAP. If that's the case, what options does that leave for Muhyiddin in shoring up support for himself?
I think the thinking behind UMNO about not working with DAP, I think that thinking is actually quite widespread among Bersatu supporters as well. They didn't have a very good experience working with DAP, so I don't think it's only an UMNO thing. I think this is part of this Malay thing within the Malay community about where the Chinese community in political terms should be situated. That's the reason why they're quite happy to accept MCA and Gerakan, but they're not willing to accept DAP. So it's a question of where they think the Chinese community politically should be situated along the political ladder, so to speak. Now, in terms of UMNO not willing to work with PKR and the DAP, I would say that they're actually willing to work with PKR, but they're not willing to work with DAP. I wouldn't take that statement seriously because at the end of the day, it's all about survival politics. In terms of UMNO, they have this idea that the place where they are really untouchable is the rural Malay areas. And the only person who can kacau them is PAS. But PAS cannot kacau them nowadays because, they've got an agreement with PAS. So if there's going to be any rupture in the rural Malays, it will come from PKR or Bersatu. So that's the reason why they're concentrating all their firepower on PKR and Bersatu.
So a term that has returned, I think, to the current political setup is this idea of a unity government, that is an option that we may see pursued. Do you agree with that? I mean, do you see that happening? And what would it take for that to occur?
I think all those people who are talking about unity government are not living on this planet. It is not possible in the near term.
Okay.
Excuse my language.
All right, that was quite concise. So, looking forwards then, if there's no unity government on the horizon, if you can look in your crystal ball and look forward to the next weeks, months to come, what do you think's going to happen?
Nothing much. There will still be instability until the budget is passed, because one of the thing that keeps the Malaysian machinery, political machinery going is money, and the money comes out of the budget. So everybody is sort of camelling around the budget. It is my prediction that Muhyiddin will not fall because of the budget. In other words, he will not be defeated on the budget issue. He will win the budget issue. Tensions, if they're going to blow up, it'll blow up after the budget, not before the budget. The other important point, which I'm surprised that nobody has raised, is that the palace has actually not said anything about Anwar, other than a single statement supposedly by the king saying that I never received the list of the YBs who supported you. Other than that, it's been complete silence. So what is interesting is that all the excitement about Anwar taking over the government has now shifted to the other side, which is that what is UMNO doing in terms of trying to disturb Muhyiddin, or is UMNO playing games on both sides? So it's quite interesting that Anwar has lost momentum completely.
Well, if I could extend that thought slightly, I mean, he has also kind of refrained from saying anything, or at least, there hasn't been sort of a big rally around any sort of public statement that he has made. What do you make of the lying low, I suppose?
I don't think it's lying low. I think it's a simple matter of him losing the momentum, because the thing about what happened in the last few days is that when people were talking about UMNO, people suddenly realized UMNO is actually talking to both sides at the very same time. And that within UMNO itself, a lot of people were kept in the dark. So at yesterday's meeting, there was a lot of unhappiness as well over this issue.
Prof, thank you so much for speaking with us this evening.
Thank you.
That was Professor James Chin, Professor of Asian Studies at the University of Tasmania, weighing in on, the political developments that we are continuing to see. If you have anything that you'd like to share, do get in touch. In the meantime, we have some music. Here are the Sonics with Louie Louie, BFM 89.9.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To find more great interviews, go to bfm.my, BFM 89.9, the business station.